Today, we're going to be looking at one Indigenous-led not-for-profit is doing to make their evaluation approaches better fit their organization's mission. Over the past few weeks, we've learned about ways, both big and small, that evaluation can perpetuate inequality, and some of the ways the field is being reinvented. Today, Dr. Nicole Bowman and Dr. Rebecca Garboyle are going to join us to share how the American Indian College Fund is building an Indigenous-focused approach to evaluation.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee Time with Masterminds.
My name is Peta Blakely, and I'm the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I am Cynthia Rojas, founder and principal of To Your Growth.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I'm Rebecca Tuttle, founder and principal of Grant Right Now and Grant Writing for Good.
Over the past few weeks, we've been learning a lot about how program evaluation might be reapproached and reinvented to advance equity. The American Indian College Fund is building a new approach to evaluating their work, and we're going to have two very exciting guests joining us today to talk about how they're doing it. Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. This is a 30-minute conversation with and for the leaders of mission-driven organizations, where we talk about leading organizations through changing and uncertain times. I want to welcome our listeners in the US and around the globe, particularly in Australia. While you're here, please introduce yourself in the comments and let us know where you're joining from. My colleague Cynthia is with me today. Good morning.
Hi, Peta. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited about today's show.
I am too. We were talking about this last week, and I think this finishes this series, but it is an important topic, and I can't wait to get our guests on.
Let's do it. Dr. Rebecca Garboyle is the Director of Organizational Learning at the American Indian College Fund, a national Native-led nonprofit organization that invests in tribal colleges and universities and Indigenous students. She's a social scientist with over 10 years of experience managing and leading research and evaluation projects across the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. And she's engaged diverse partnership through an equity lens. Thank you for joining us, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm also going to bring on Dr. Nicole Bowman. Dr. Nicole Bowman, who's Lenape and Mohican, is the president of Bowman Performance Consulting and an associate scientist for evaluation at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Her decolonized and liberatory work sits at the intersection of truth, culture, language, sovereignty, community, and evaluation. Through the American Evaluation Association, Dr. Bowman is the policy chair for the Indigenous Peoples in Evaluation Group and an appointed member of the Evaluation Policy Task Force. She also holds a global appointment for the International Evaluation Academy and Eval Indigenous. She is the co-editor for Roots and Relations through the Canadian Journal of Program Evaluation and the co-editor of a special issue on decolonization and evaluation through the International Journal of Multidisciplinary Evaluation. Both those journals are free access and give the intellectual property rights to Indigenous authors, not the publishing house. She's also an auntie, sister, daughter, and wife who uses traditional Lenape Mohican life ways to live a good life and be in service to others. Thank you so much for joining us today, Rebecca and Nikki.
Kolomosi relatives. Buckle up.
So Nikki, you are on this project as the consultant, and Rebecca is representing the College Fund. Tell me, what was the problem here, right? What were you setting out to address?
Yes, that's a great question. So what we were really looking at is, this is from an organizational learning perspective. We were thinking about how do we be responsive and culturally resonant in the space of organizational learning. This initiative actually around our strategic learning and evaluation approach and how to really indigenize that started with a conversation around who we are as a learning organization and how we want to look at our impacts as an organization through our strategic plan. So it was kind of a top-down, bottom-up conversation about how do we look at our impacts as an organization, and then also how do we think about, evaluation and learning across our organization, because different teams and different programs really had some different perspectives on this. We are the nation's largest Native-led nonprofit in higher education. We serve tribal colleges and we give scholarships to Native students, most of whom are at tribal colleges. And we really wanted to take a closer look at these questions because of who we are as an Indigenous-led organization. And so we put our heads together and decided that we were going to take a step back and really develop a strategic learning and evaluation approach for the College Fund based in who we are as an Indigenous-led, Indigenous-serving organization.
The only thing that I can add to that is I am the B in Bowman Performance Consulting, but we have a team of 9 people for this Indigenous-led project. I'm a traditional member and a regular citizen member of the Stockbridge Munsee Tribe, Band of the Mohicans in Wisconsin. And we have 9 main staff that work on the project, 4 PhDs, 3 of which are Native PhDs. From there we have Indigenous analysts and support staff as well. But it's multi-generational. So our youngest, is I think Ben is in his late 20s, maybe early 30s. And then Dr. Warner is in her 70s. And I hope she isn't mad if she hears this. And when I say it's kinship, it's a nice mix. It's a nice mix of age, intersectionality, Native, non-Native. So there's a big team. It's just not Nikki. This is a big project and an important project.
Yeah, and this is a significant reorientation, right? Rethinking. Where do you start in a project like that, right? What were some of the what were some of the approaches that influenced where you started? Who do you involve in these discussions? If an organization was going to do something like this, right? How do you establish a new approach?
So when we started talking about this, we started looking at, well, who's really kind of thought about strategic learning and evaluation systems within the evaluation world. And, some consultants at Foundations of Successful Governance, FSG, have really thought about this idea. And so we started looking at their work and looking at how they've built out strategic learning and evaluation systems from the ground up, premised on, a set of core values in evaluation and learning, and then shaping practices around those core values, and then applying those insights to strategic planning and measuring organizational impact. And we thought this is a really neat approach, but we need to make it look right and fit for us at the College Fund as an Indigenous-led organization. And so we thought, well, we really need to take a different approach and make sure that we hire an Indigenous consultant to really help us take this approach and make it our own and reflect who we are. And so we actually sat down. This project has been really participatory, collaborative, and reciprocal since the get-go. So we actually formed a staff advisory committee at the College Fund to guide this project, to ensure that it was that it included some of our Native staff and leadership, that Native voice was at the table, and that it would be responsive to our organization as we moved forward. And so the staff advisory team, we put our heads together, we drafted a project charter to talk about what this work was going to be, why we wanted to do it for our organization, to make our learning practices more equity-based and responsive. And then we issued an RFP really calling for a consulting team to help us take this methodology for a strategic learning and evaluation system and help us indigenize it and make it fit for the College Fund. So we issued that RFP, and a number of teams responded, including Nikki's team at Bowman Performance Consulting. Our staff advisory team did interviews with all of these consulting teams, really thought about who was going to be the right fit. We wanted to hire a Native-owned consulting firm to help us drive this work. And, Nikki is an expert in Indigenous evaluation and a leader in that space. And so she and her team were really a great fit for us to be thought partners in this work and make sure that Indigenous empowerment piece was really driving the process.
And I have to say, it was pretty intense. The RFP was very well written. There was a lot of visiting that went back and forth just to respond to the RFP. There was an interview process. There was still more tweaking. And I mean, we probably went back and forth negotiating a contract, for a couple of months, and had some really thoughtful discussion. And you can really find out a lot about partnership based on these thoughtful discussions, because you're investing not just financial resources, but your heart and your mind. You get to listen, how are people communicating with each other, and came up with a good strategy. We even said that if we're not the ones chosen, because I think it was down to a couple of us, if I remember right, that was last summer. This is about kinship. So I said, even if we're not chosen, please keep us in mind, for future things. But if we can offer you, like, I share resources all the time. Like, I love having a relationship with people, even if the contract doesn't work out. And I say no to most asks, because now in my next 50 years, I want to make sure we're doing things that live beyond BPC and Nikki Bowman. And the American Indian College Fund is the oldest organization and supports the most Indigenous students, undergrad and grad, to get through college. So we have voice and visibility. So I'm part of that community, even though we may not have been part of the contract. So we felt grateful that we were even, in the running. And obviously, that we try to have humility and great respect, and just sort of being part of something bigger than us, even though this is a very specific project. But we want it to be awesome, because it's going to help it's going to help the organization that is the organization that helps our students, so they can graduate and do their own thing with the way they do voice and visibility. Yeah. So it's a bigger movement.
And we had, what was really interesting to me about the RFP process, having been part of these on a couple of other occasions, is we actually had a 12-person staff advisory team that came from College Fund leadership and staff from around our organization. There were Native staff and other diverse staff on there. And we interviewed each of the consulting candidates for the strategic learning and evaluation system. So all 12 people joined those interviews, asked questions, tried to get to know our candidates, and then we made a collective decision about who we wanted to hire to do the work for us. And Nikki and her team really were the best fit for us. But that was an interesting process. And we actually also sat down with the references for each of these Indigenous consulting firms and other firms that applied, and really talked to the references about, how did this consulting firm really help you represent who you are as an Indigenous or a BIPOC-led organization? And were they responsive to you? Did they understand who you are? Because that was really important to us and our team at the College Fund, that we really got the right fit who could understand the Native values, the Native knowledge, and who we are.
You used the term indigenize, right? You said, how do we indigenize this approach? What did that mean to you? Or did you know going into this process what that meant? Or is that one of the things that had to be invented through the process?
I think we knew conceptually that we wanted to take this tool of a strategic learning and evaluation system and really make it fit for a Native-led, Native-serving organization, so that it was reflective of, grounded in Native values, Native knowledge, Native approaches, so that we could really take a critical look at learning and evaluation as practices and make sure they were uplifting to the Native people that we serve, and engaging of those people, giving people voice and choice in that, the people we serve voice and choice in that space. We didn't know how to exactly do that, though, so that's why we invited Dr. Bowman and her team, who are experts in Indigenous evaluation, to really help us think through, what is this going to look like, and how do we build this out, given who we are as an organization? So that's been a learning process, and we still are actually building out our strategic learning and evaluation system. We've been working with Nikki and her team for a year and a half now, and we've actually gotten through putting together our vision for how we do learning and evaluation at the American Indian College Fund, and what the core values are that are guiding that vision, really kind of helping us rethink, how do we approach these practices and what does that mean for us? But this is an ongoing project for us, so we continue to learn about how to best do this.
Nikki, tell us briefly, like, what is Indigenous evaluation, right? Because I know that we are going to have people listening today who are, who did not know this was a thing, right? And this is a topic that applies not just to Native Americans, but Indigenous populations around the world. So what does this mean?
Well, it's sort of following what Rebecca is saying, like, this has to be decollege funds. You can't be pan-Indigenous. They serve, I don't know how many tribal communities or tribes you serve, but it's a big number. And so to try to get the college fund to think about not only their broader branding, visually and in text or writing or the spirit of it, you have to sort of tweak that for how do you want to do evaluation. And I think some of we had a lot of really wonderful experiences in terms of getting to what does Indigenous evaluation mean. Indigenous evaluation means whatever the organization or the community says it means. That's how I roll and facilitate. I can tell you what the literature says from the global north and south. Indigenous is a word that I use broadly, but if you're in Canada, it's First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. If you're down here, it's Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian, American Indian, Native American. It's sort of whatever the folks tell you. Obviously Maori down in New Zealand, Aboriginal in Australia. But I think about the work that we do as, if you come to a feast or if you come to a ceremony, you're one person. This is where the traditional roots are. Or if you come to cookout, a family reunion, everybody brings something, right? And so when if everybody brings something to the table, our job is to listen and to facilitate. And we're able to facilitate and get to Indigenous evaluation through, I think of Dr. Braithwaite using Mural and his team of EvaluAct to help us bring art and do some pre-work so that we can look at images and have thoughtful discussions and do storytelling and talking story. Like, a lot of the work that we do to get to Indigenous evaluation isn't, here's what the literature says. It's literally asking good questions and being a good relative, right? So that we can have decent discussions, and then continuing to ask refining questions, bringing back the next iteration of, like, evaluation values, the evaluation vision and values, and we sort of keep going at it. So Indigenous evaluation is culturally responsive, but it's also culturally specific. And so it involves culture and language and cultural content, ceremonies, however the community or the organization defines it. That's what Indigenous evaluation is.
Yeah.
And that, there's lots of literature out there that will tell you what it is, but you will see that sovereignty is part of it, cultural content is part of it, having children to adults to elders is part of it, 7 generations is part of it. There are origin stories. I think even that's how we originally approached it, is said, what is the origin story for Indigenous evaluation for the college fund? That's sort of how we started it. And it may seem that it sounds informal, but I promise you that there's a very effective and evidence-based process in the way that we do our work together, the way we braid and weave our work together.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry I didn't say this is Indigenous evaluation, but it's out there. I published things.
No, I appreciate that. And I particularly appreciate one of the things I'm hearing, which is Indigenous evaluation is what, whoever shows up and how they bring it, which means it is not stuck in time. Indigenous evaluation next year is going to be different from this year, right?
But the roots will always, if you have good roots, that plant can grow and it can weather things. And evaluation should be a living document.
Yeah.
Our thinking changes, the context of practice around us change. And, I call myself a blue collar scholar for a reason, and I think a lot of people like that. I know how to publish and do the Dr. Bowman things, but if this doesn't work for the people I'm in alokian, which means in service to, then it's dumb, because it's not the Nikki show. It's really about having cultural and academic humility. And listen, it ain't been all, rainbows and unicorns. But we have built a trusting, caring relationship with one another, where we show our vulnerabilities, where we show who we are and how we want to show up in this work and in the world and in the work product. So I really value that process as well.
Yeah.
We have a comment that I just want to show. One of our viewers is asked the question, is there any plan to share the approach and associated resources for public benefit?
Mhm.
Where can Dr. Taha get more information?
It's a great question. Yes, at the end of this project, so this project is still ongoing, and we'd love to talk with you more about it, Dr. Taha, if you have specific questions. But we will be presenting at some conferences, including the American Evaluation Association, about what we've been doing in this space, and we would like to, publish a paper about what this approach has looked like for us. But we're happy to be in conversation as this is an ongoing project. I did want to mention, one of the things Nikki was talking about is how we kind of came to our own definition of what Indigenous evaluation is at the College Fund. And we've actually spent about the last year visiting with our staff from the ground up through focus groups, through workshops that have been very interactive and participatory, really asking them questions about when they think about learning and evaluation, what comes to mind, what really resonates for them. And we've come up with a set actually of 5 core values that we're in the process of finalizing. But these have come from our team and from these conversations and coding. Nikki and her team have coded these conversations to identify these core values. And some of them are an intergenerational sense of being and responsibility. So this idea that the work we're doing isn't just for one generation, it's for those that have come before us and those that will come after us, that the sort of ripples of evaluation and learning extend beyond just one generation. Another example of a core value that's come to the surface, which Nikki also described as sovereignty. So really honoring and upholding the sovereignty of Native people and Native nations, as well as that data sovereignty piece, that the information that we gather through evaluation and learning really belongs to the communities that we serve, and comes from and is part of Native people, and they should have a role in sense making around that data and helping us really understand what that means and be actively invited into that workspace with us. We've also, from our staff, come up with this core value of honoring diverse Native voices and experiences to guide us. So we at the College Fund, when we have 35 accredited tribal colleges that we work with, and we serve scholars from over 200 tribal nations. There's more than 500 federally recognized tribal nations in the United States. So we just have an incredible diversity of Native people who we serve and support. And so honoring that within our staff and within our partners and within the broader communities that we serve, and seeing that diversity as an asset, that there are different ways of knowing and being and philosophies that we really want to make sure come into this work, is a part of these core values. Being a good relative to people in place, this has emerged as a core value for us. So then this really is about recognizing that we are all in a web of relationships, human and other than human. So with the environment around us, with two-legged, with four-legged beings, and these are words that come from our staff. These are not my own words. So this is really from the ground up, where this definition of what Indigenous learning and evaluation looks like has come from.
This is a good place to bring up a comment from our audience. Madeline writes, Nikki, since the College Fund works with a variety of communities, how do you curate the specific local Indigenous evaluation practice for that wide breadth of peoples, which I think kind of goes to what Rebecca was just describing?
I don't know that I'm a curator. This is sort of a traditional, I'm a traditional Lenape woman, and I try to learn from other traditional people. I would say that Dr. Dave Sanders, that's all of our bosses. He's the Vice President for Research, Learning, and Evaluation. Did I get that right, Rebecca?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. He is a Lakota man and he's traditional. I try to learn from other traditional people. So first of all, I don't know that I would say curate. I would say I'm a caretaker. Just like we are caretakers of the earth, and we were given tobacco as our first medicine, not owners of it. I do evaluation the same way. Now, I fight for intellectual and cultural property rights. So when these publishing houses or whomever want us to write for free and then say they get worldwide exclusive rights, I don't write for those people. But that's why I mentioned the Canadian Journal of Program Evaluation, Journal Multidisciplinary Evaluation, and now Oxford University Press has Indigenous specific agreements. So I'm not a curator, I'm a caretaker. And so for each project that I have that we work on, and it's probably 15 to 20 a year or over 3 to 5 years, depending how long the project lasts, we have a shared space with the client that everybody owns and is part of. And they get all the information. We caretake it, and it's a shared space. So we take care of it. And then as far as curating or like maybe collecting, I might write articles, or I have on my website, I have a free culturally responsive, Indigenous and equitable and, fill in the blank DEI, sort of 14 to 16 page. It's free though, like I don't charge for it. And it's just articles or things that I'm reading or doing right now, but I would never, not unless, the college fund said it was okay for me to do it. Like, that's just not how I roll, because there's no contract big enough that would cover my reputation. I want being trusted and being a good relative are the most important parts. So I put in the chat some of the places that you can find the people that I love and celebrate. There's never going to be enough Indigenous evaluators to do all of this work. So we need to have allies and partners, and we need to act as caretakers of each other and of the work that we're doing, or the work products that may come out, so that we are good. So we go beyond doing no harm, right, to being a good relative. That's something that I always say. So I hope I answered your question.
I have a question. So we a couple of weeks ago had a CEO from a foundation that is also looking at evaluative practices that are centered in BIPOC, Black and Brown individual serving organizations. And she worked with other organizations on an evaluation approach. And it was really interesting, really, really different. A lot of the things you guys are saying, it didn't have those oppressive structures in place where everything is rushed and we have a deadline and it has to be a specific way because one person said that. And one of the interesting things that they did is that midway through, because they had to do the work of healing, they grew tired and they paused. And I think, Peter, they paused for like a month. They took a month off.
I think they took longer than that. I think they took several months. I mean, it was,
and then
like Nikki and Rebecca have said, like, this is hard work intellectually and personally. Yeah. It was really hard. And
physical, mental, spiritual, emotional. And I'll say we had to refine our master contract, and and made an addendum and had to make some, switches along the way, or refinements, I guess. Yeah. And one of the things that both of our companies agreed to, our organizations said, is we need some pause and reflection time. And I think that's done well. And we even have built in little mini native huddles, or mini huddles just with the key people from the College Fund and BPC, and building that in really, I think, has helped us mentally, emotionally, and practically, with the work that we do. And it wasn't something that was, poo-pooed. It was something that's really valued. And it's honestly a practice that we are starting to incorporate in our other projects. Like, if it can work for the College Fund and BPC, that's something that was an unintended impact of this work together, to go, colonization says rush, 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 produce, timeline, and we're not about that life. And so I really love that part of our working relationship. And it's not just in mouth, it's in structural and financial terms in this contract, besides how we treat each other day to day, week to week, month to month.
That's awesome. And we're running out of time. We could talk to you guys forever, but I have to ask, because I think, Nikki, I I think it's important to mention that having a partner like the American Indian College Fund is also vital. But how do we get other philanthropists? How do we get the feds who are always asking for data where it's numbers and graphs and bar charts
Right.
to appreciate the story and the storytelling and to appreciate the process? How do we do that?
All I want to say to the feds or anybody who's funding things is that if what you were doing was working, we wouldn't still be working on the same problems decade after decade, century after century. For my community, the education outcomes, the social outcomes, the financial outcomes, the health outcomes haven't changed much. So you have to build it differently and do it differently. And that means, it also means honoring our treaty and constitutional rights. We're supposed to be nation to nation, and we're not a state. There should be nation to nation in evaluation, a systems level of doing this work. Just like there's consultation, there should be memorandums of agreements of nations coming together. And I hope I can see that in my lifetime. I really, really do.
Yes.
Rebecca, help me.
Yeah.
What did I miss?
I think it's just really trying to build relationships and get to know the communities on the ground and inviting them to the table to help them drive the work. So co-creating and having discussions around, what are the challenges that are trying to be addressed? What is the best way to solve those? A lot of that really has to come from the community, and how to measure success is a discussion where parts of that come from the community. And I think parts of that can, come from other kinds of accountabilities, but it's really important to sit down and talk with the people that you're working with, understand who they are, understand the context that you're working in, and do that co-creation around problems and solutions and measurements. And because you're right, it's not all numbers. It's we talk about this all the time at the College Fund. It's stories and numbers. Both of those together are powerful impact data.
Mhm.
The medical model for what counts as evidence doesn't work on social science, doesn't work for social science. And all you need to do is look at the outcomes that haven't changed. And so
We haven't solved any of these problems yet.
We have to get
right?
further upriver too.
Yeah.
Like, we don't want to be on a sidecar Indian only advisory group. We are scientists who also happen to be Indigenous. We are smart people that should be in the room with all the other Evidence-Based Policy Act advisory group members. There's not one tribe or one Indigenous scholar on there. We have to know their stuff and our stuff. So we are ready. Bring it. Where is the opening? Yeah, I'm getting fired. I'm glad it's sort of getting to the end because I'm trying to behave. But
The comments are also firing up. So.
Yeah. Yeah, they are.
Don't make me pull out my.
I love it. All right.
We'll take one last
This was
comment.
fun. Why do we have to quit? I can stay here for a while. It's Friday.
We will definitely bring you back. We will definitely. I have so many more questions, but we have a question.
Yeah. So Laura's asking, how can other Indigenous people outside of the U.S. with diasporas in the U.S. who are seeking to learn together with other peoples co-learn and advocate about effective processes as fellow citizens? Is there an overarching way to engage about problems, solutions, data, and stories?
Become part of the evaluation community. I mean, there's the American Evaluation Association. The VOPE, in my opinion, that does the best job globally is probably the Maori Aotearoa Evaluation Association and Canadian Evaluation Association. You just got to get involved. This is an ongoing conversation. There's many beautiful intersectional, all kinds of intersection, not just race and ethnicity folks that we work with, but just come be part of the community. We're really a lot of fun. I mean, it doesn't sound like it, but we really are. There's a very vibrant, and when you work in the way that, Rebecca and I are working, on this project and our comrades, it's heart-filled, and it fills your intellect and it fills your heart and spirit because you're working on something bigger than yourself. Evaluation is very big to me. It's the way I do the civil rights movement. Evidence is what researchers don't make policy, evaluators do. evidence-based policy comes from an external evaluator working on things. And I'm sure I'm
Right.
going to make a lot of researchers mad, but like, we do work in a good way, you know, and so just come be part of the community. I wish,
Yeah.
Laura, I could answer it more succinctly, but just come hang out and you'll see.
Yes.
Rebecca was swept up. I invited her to the last AEA down in New Orleans. I'm like, hey girl, hey, do you need me to introduce you to anyone? She was out on her way, and like I hardly got to see her. Like I was Jan, not Mar. I was Jan, not Marsha. She was Marsha.
And there are, I just want to acknowledge that, Nikki and others are just amazing leaders in Indigenous evaluation, and they are Native people and Indigenous people themselves. So there are just so many incredible people driving the field who come from Indigenous and Native communities and are leaders and are academics and have great insights to share. And those are the people we should be seeking out. I'm an ally to Native people. I am a white evaluator who works at the College Fund and works alongside our Native colleagues and our diverse staff, and along with people like Nikki. And, we need to have Indigenous leaders at the table and experts to drive this work too.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you to both of you.
Yeah, this has been fascinating. So we've added several links in the comments where you can see upcoming conferences where Nikki and Rebecca are going to be presenting on this ongoing work. We've also put up the link to Dr. Bowman's website and journals and resources that she's recommending. This has been fantastic, and we have all learned so much. Thank you very much for joining us, Nikki and Rebecca. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Thank
Good luck.
you.